Chapter 2451, Natural Spirit Array. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Brother Yang is a dragon among men, but if you want to subdue the mountains and rivers Bell, you can't just depend on handsomeness. Chi Hai summoned up his courage and stated. He was the one requesting Yangkai's help, so he couldn't be too straightforward, lest he made Yangkai upset. Yangkai's expression changed as he asked, judging by Brother Chi's words, do you know the way to conquer the mountains and rivers Bell? Of course I don't know the way to subdue it, but this Chi has some information about it for Brother Yang. Oh, let's hear it. Yangkai immediately became interested. Chi Hai continued, the world only knows that the mountains and rivers Bell is the Yuan Ding Great Emperor's natal emperor artifact, but what few know is that the mountains and rivers Bell didn't belong to the Yuan Ding Great Emperor from the start. It's an ancient exotic artifact. Ancient exotic artifact. Yangkai's pupils shrank after hearing this. Indeed, Chi Hai explained with a nod, it was precisely because the Yuan Ding Great Emperor got his hands on the mountains and rivers Bell that he could become a great emperor. It could be said that the mountains and rivers Bell made him a great emperor. So it was like this. Yangkai got to hear a lot of surprising things. This was really a big secret, and had Chi Hai not told him, Yangkai might never have learned this. If not, how can the mountains and rivers Bell suppress the Phoenix true fire? What's more, after the suppression, even heaven-devouring Great Emperor was unable to break through its defenses. If it were a normal Emperor artifact, it would have been impossible for it to suppress the Phoenix true fire for tens of thousands of years. Yangkai felt that this also made sense. The Phoenix true fire was extremely overbearing, yet it was suppressed by the mountains and rivers Bell for tens of thousands of years. If the mountains and rivers Bell hadn't flown away on its own, it might have been impossible for the Phoenix true fire to see daylight again. Then Brother Chi, isn't there something you were going to tell me? Yangkai asked in a deep voice. Chi Hai's expression turned grim as he continued, it is written in ancient records that the Yuan Ding Great Emperor had ventured into the Eastern Territory's ancient wildlands in the past. There, he had stumbled upon an enormous bell. It was the mountains and rivers Bell. At that time, Yuan Divine Great Emperor was just an ordinary emperor realm master. He wanted to subdue the mountains and rivers Bell but was unable to. In the end, he forcefully endured its 81 gongs and finally won the approval of the mountains and rivers Bell. Only then was he able to bring it out from ancient wildlands. The mountains and rivers Bell actually came from the ancient wildlands. Yangkai's eyes lit up. He had heard Chi Hai mention ancient wildlands before, but he hadn't paid too much attention to it, but now, after hearing that the mountains and rivers Bell came from the ancient wildlands, Yangkai naturally realized that it was an incredible place. Secretly, he decided that he would go there and take a look if got the opportunity. However, the Yuan Ding Great Emperor actually endured 81 gongs to finally obtain the mountains and rivers Bell's recognition. It was a remarkable feat. Yangkai had also experienced the might of the mountains and rivers Bell firsthand. A third-order Dao Source Realm cultivator had died on spot just by coming in contact with it, so Yangkai wasn't confident that he could withstand its 81 gongs. By informing him of this, Chi Hai had undoubtedly provided Yangkai with a way to subdue the mountains and rivers Bell, but the danger was also great. Brother Yang, if you are uncertain, I advise you to ignore the mountains and rivers Bell. There are still many priceless treasures in the Shattered Star Sea. You and I can together. Before he could finish speaking, Yangkai interrupted him, I would still like to go and see. Chi Hai's face darkened as he said, since that's the case, then this Chi won't persuade you anymore. Brother Yang, please be careful along the way. Many thanks, Brother Chi. See you again. Yangkai pursed his lips into a smile and while speaking, his figure flickered, flying off into the void. Chi Hai stood in his place, staring at Yangkai's back with a complicated look on his face. Only after a long time did a heavy sigh finally escape his lips before he went searching in another direction, alone. He didn't have a deep friendship with Yangkai, but judging by the fact that Yangkai promised him that he would visit the Chi family fort in the Eastern Territory if he got the chance, it was quite evident that Yangkai was an easygoing person. Had it been someone else, he or she would have totally ignored him, or more likely, silenced him. After all, Chi Hai had witnessed Yangkai suppressing and subduing the Phoenix true fire. If the word of this got out, Yangkai would have pretty hard days ahead of him. It was precisely for this reason that Chi Hai vowed first to not speak a word of what he saw. However, he had no confidence that Yangkai would go to the Chi family fort and look for him. If Yangkai didn't visit, then his wife would really die, but even if Yangkai went there, in light of his wife's current condition, she only had a slim chance, that's all. Yangkai flew in the direction of the mountains and rivers bell for half a day before he suddenly sensed that soul mark he had left on Lanhe. When Lanhe passed by him earlier, he deliberately patted Lanhe's shoulder, just so that he could plant the soul mark, giving him a chance to track the mountain and rivers bell easily. As for becoming the target of Lanhe's discontent and suspicion, that was inevitable and unavoidable. Without this soul mark, Yangkai would never be able to track the location of the mountains and rivers bell. Yangkai immediately flew in the direction of the soul mark, and after another hour, Yangkai finally saw Lanhe's figure somewhere in the void. However, what surprised him was that Lanhe was fighting with some people at this moment. Furthermore, she was being besieged. Yangkai focused his gaze and found that two besieging here were third-order Dao Source Realm Masters. Their cultivation was pretty good, and with 1 against 2, Lanhe appeared to be in a rather precarious situation. She seemed to have suffered a lot of injuries already and she was bleeding in a lot of places. When he took a second look at the surroundings, Yangkai found that almost none of the dozens of cultivators that were on the dark red star before had fallen. Everyone was here. And the mountains and rivers bell was hovering in the void in one place, completely still. Everyone was looking at the mountains and rivers bell with a greedy and covetous gaze, but no one stepped forward to fight for it. Yangkai found this extremely strange and he had no idea what was going on here. However, what put his heart at ease was that Yin Lesheng of the Netherworld sect was still here. Yangkai was pretty relieved by this. The Shattered Star Sea was so vast, so if he lost track of Yin Lesheng, Yangkai wasn't confident he could find him again. Almost everyone remained still in the void. Only Lanhe was fighting with 2 opponents, so Yangkai's arrival attracted a lot of attention. Yin Lesheng, too, indifferently glanced at him, but as Yangkai was wearing a disguise, he wasn't recognized. Don't come here. Just when Yangkai was rushing over, Lanhe, who happened to be fighting and at a disadvantage, suddenly shouted at Yangkai. Due to this momentary distraction, she had suffered 2 more wounds as blood spurted from them. Yangkai looked at her in astonishment, wondering why she prevented him from approaching when she was still being ganged upon. If it was because she was disgusted by his previous actions, then she was being too sensitive. However, very soon, Yangkai understood her intention. Just as he rushed over, he suddenly noticed an anomaly around him. There was a natural spirit array hidden in this place, one that was extremely dangerous and well concealed. He didn't notice it from outside at all, but as soon as he entered it, Yangkai felt as if he was surrounded by a crisis, unable to find a way out. No wonder no one was acting rashly when the mountains and rivers bell was right in front of them. The place where the mountains and rivers bell was seemed to be the most dangerous place in this entire natural spirit array, causing Yangkai to tremble all over. After understanding this, Yangkai's face turned black. The dozens of cultivators in the vicinity were looking at him with a mocking look on their faces, taking pleasure in his misfortune. Yangkai coldly snorted as he shouted, "What are you looking at? Bunch of wastes, do you believe this young master won't gouge your eyes out?" Having accidentally rushed into this natural spirit array had somewhat annoyed Yangkai, and even though it was normal for these people to not warn him, their act of taking pleasure in his misfortune was very irritating. As soon as he said this, several dozen pairs of eyes were fixed on him, their murderous intent instantly spilling over to the surroundings, causing this part of the void to freeze. Every cultivator here was an elite of some great force and had always been to ones to be on the receiving end of respect, but today, they had been called wastes by Yangkai. How could they take it? Not to mention, Yangkai scolded everyone in one sentence. He was too lawless and he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Many people looked at Yangkai as if they were looking at a dead person. Yangkai spat disdainfully, as if he didn't put any of them in his eyes. He then turned to Lanhe and asked, "What hatred or grievance do you have with these 2 that you have to fight here?" The act of Lanhe warning him not to come when she was under attack had slightly moved Yangkai. Naturally, he couldn't sit back and watch this without doing anything. Lanhe lashed out, annoyed, "It's a matter between our sects, nothing to do with personal enmity." The reason why she warned Yangkai was not because she was trying to save Yangkai. Rather, she wanted Yangkai to send a message to her sect to inform them about her own situation. If she died here, at least someone would know about it. But this idiot actually rushed in, so now he couldn't leave even if he wanted to. Lanhe found that ever since she met this guy, everything had been going wrong, as if he was some kind of god of misfortune plaguing her. One of the 2 men besieging Lanhe shouted, "Slut, eldest senior brother was castrated by you. He is neither man nor ghost from now on, and you dare to say that it has nothing to do with personal enmity." As soon as this was mentioned, everyone's expression was unusually brilliant and secretly sympathized with that unknown eldest senior brother. As a man, getting castrated was a tragic thing, and just the thought of it caused many legs to clamp tightly. Lan he rebuked with a cold snort. He used that thing to try to commit an outrageous act against me, he should be punished for it. The man angrily lashed out, with your looks, no man in this world will ever be interested in you. I think you were just jealous, that's why you did such a sinister thing to eldest senior brother. The other man yelled, yes, as a woman, you'll never get to have a man in your life. If you don't believe it, you can try it out and see if any man here will be interested in you. He's a she. One of the surrounding cultivators stared at Lan he with widened eyes as he asked in amazement. I'm really blind. I thought she was a man. TSK, this girl is really interesting. Could it be that she was born in the wrong family? Ha ha, you don't understand, the more a woman is like her, the more interesting it is to play with her. Brother, your tastes are quite heavy. Eek, Chapter 2452, It's Him. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Lan He's face flushed red while listening to the noisy comments coming from all around her, whether it was because she was angered or ashamed, however, it was impossible to tell. Even though she had a neutral personality and her appearance was flat, she was still a woman and naturally felt embarrassed when someone spoke such things right in her face. Even if her will was firm, she couldn't help being disturbed by such overt harassment. Seeing this, the two cultivators besieging her looked happy and started to attack even more ruthlessly. Lan He was quite strong, though, so although her two attackers had an absolute advantage, they would still have to pay a hefty price if they wanted to really kill her. But at this moment, Lan He's emotions were in chaos, so her defeat was imminent, it was only a matter of time. At this moment, another person broke into laughter, mocking Lan He, who hasn't heard of the famous Heavenly Wolf Valley's eldest senior brother Lan He. Oh, sorry, I was wrong, it should be eldest senior sister, ha ha ha. Yangkai found this person's voice familiar, turning his head to look and realizing it was none other than Brahma Holy Land's holy sons, Zhang Hao and Zhang Xian, whom he had met once before. The speaker was Zhang Hao, who had fought against Yangkai before. By the looks of it, he was acquainted with Lan He, and it didn't sound like a friendly relationship. There might be some dispute between them, so he didn't shy away from adding insult to injury here. Heavenly Wolf Valley, Yangkai raised his brow, feeling as if he had heard of this sect somewhere before, but even after mulling over it, he couldn't remember. Whether she is a man or a woman, let's quickly check it. Someone made a ruckus, rallying many along with him. Shut up. Yangkai glared at everyone before sneering, is it really that interesting to watch a group of men bully a woman? The person, who just yelled, immediately lashed out angrily, little brat, who do you think you are? You were just being arrogant and now you dare to treat others with contempt. I dare you report your name. Others also glared at Yangkai and everyone was extremely dissatisfied with his arrogant attitude. Yangkai coldly snorted, completely ignoring that one who spoke before his figure flickered and he flew towards Lan He. Halfway there, he summoned 100 golden blood threads. Suddenly, a dazzling golden flash blinded everyone as the golden blood threads soared through the void. Although the two besieging Lan He were focused on their battle with Lan He, they were still paying close attention to Yangkai's movements. After all, he seemed to have some friendship with her. So, when Yangkai made a move, the two of them promptly reacted, one of them turning to confront Yangkai, shouting, "Boy, you caught death." Unleashing a slash from his sword, it seemed as if space was being cut asunder. The incomparably fierce blade aura made the world go dark and everyone paled at the sight of this. But suddenly, the golden blood threads transformed into an enormous golden net that gave the impression that it could cover the entire world, directly trapping the sword wave. The next moment, grating noises rang out. Although the sword wave was quite strong, it was unable to break through the golden blood threads. Instead, it was pushed back while the golden blood thread net remained completely unaffected and it continued shooting straight towards the cultivator while shrinking rapidly, looking like it was about to wrap around him. The man's face drastically changed. Although he had no idea what was special about this golden net, the terrifying fluctuations emanating from it were impossible to ignore. Not daring to let it touch him, he made a prompt retreat. But the next moment, his eyes widened in shock as his face went pale as a ghost. Because Yangkai, who had been hundreds of meters away from him before, was now somehow standing right before him with a wicked grin on his face. The vicious glint in Yangkai's eyes made this man's feet go cold as he trembled all over. He didn't even notice how Yang Kai got so close to him. It was as if he had fallen into a momentary trance, then the two were already standing face to face. As their gazes met, that cultivator only saw a white lotus bud image suddenly fly out of Yang Kai's left eye. The bud was spotless and pure, but it disappeared in a flash. The next moment, his knowledge sea suddenly shook, making him dizzy and almost knocking him off the ground. The next moment, Yang Kai threw a punch. Catcher. At the same time, the sound of ribs cracking came out as blood splashed into the void. The man stood rooted in place, dazed as he gawked at Yang Kai with a look of incredulity hanging on his face. At the same time, gasps could be heard coming from all around. Because everyone saw Yang Kai rush in front of his opponent using some unknown secret technique or divine ability. The next moment, a painful look appeared on his opponent's face before Yang Kai punched straight through the man's chest, leaving a huge gaping hole. The eyes of all the cultivators standing nearby this place jumped wildly. Because at this moment, Yang Kai was actually holding a beating heart in his hand. This scene was so bloody that they didn't dare to look directly at it. With a slight force, the heart burst apart, and along with this sound, the head of the cultivator, whose chest was punched through, tilted to one side as his aura disappeared altogether. Gudong. Sounds of everyone nervously gulping were heard, one after another. Many people's gazes toward Yang Kai changed dramatically as even the strongest and most prideful people present here had serious and grim looks on their faces. Killing a cultivator of the same level in the blink of an eye and in a completely relaxed fashion was not something everyone present here could do. Even if they could do it, they would have to resort to their most powerful secret techniques, which would consume a lot of their strength. On the other hand, Yang Kai just summoned a big golden net, and then threw a punch. It was like he was killing a chicken rather than a third-order Dao Source Realm master. Only now did everyone finally realize that Yang Kai had the capital to act so arrogant, not putting any of them in his eyes. It's him. Zhang Hao narrowed his eyes, staring at Yang Kai closely, seemingly realizing something. Who? Zhang Xian asked in a low voice. Zhang Hao answered with a grim look, if I'm not mistaken, he's the guy we saw with Yu Ying before. Zhang Xian was greatly shocked. How is that possible? Didn't you injure that guy in one move? How can he be this strong then? Not to mention, the two of them look completely different. Zhang Hao explained, one's appearance can be changed, but their aura can't be disguised. I could tell when he made his move just now. This kid hit himself deeply. He definitely concealed his strength before. But if he is here, what about Yu Ying? Zhang Xian replied with a straight face, since this brat is so ruthless, Yu Ying's fate was most likely quite miserable. Zhang Hao worriedly stated, I hit him before. I wonder if he's holding a grudge against me for it. If he attacked me like how he just did. At this point, his face went slightly pale. As a holy son of Brahma Holy Land, Zhang Hao had never been afraid of anyone in the Dao Source realm before. But witnessing Yang Kai's decisive and ruthless move, he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Zhang Xian's expression changed as he proposed, if Yu Ying really died under his hand, we can inform the Netherworld sect. Yin Lishang isn't a well-tempered man. Zhang Hao's eyes lit up after hearing this and he hurriedly agreed with a nod, yes, we can do this. While the two were secretly communicating, the battle on Lan He's side ended. Lan He was not to be underestimated based on her stunted growth and appearance, her strength was nothing to make light of. The reason she had fallen into a disadvantage before was that she was fighting 1 versus 2, but now that Yang Kai had instantly killed one of her attackers, shaking the other's nerves greatly, it didn't take long for Lan He to kill him by taking advantage of the lapse in concentration. Immediately after, 2 star seals flew up into the void before being taken away by Yang Kai and Lan He respectively. Even the space rings were quickly divvied up by them. Having survived the disaster, Lan He gratefully glanced at Yang Kai. No matter why Yang Kai had helped her, the fact was that Yang Kai had saved her life. Had Yang Kai not made a move, her death would have just been a matter of time. At best, she could have dragged one of her attackers down with her. Who was it that was asking who this young master thinks he is? Yang Kai looked around and shouted in an arrogant manner, come, come. Stand forth, this young master will tell you now. The person who had spoken earlier had already hidden behind the crowd, trembling in fear. Friend, you should show some propriety, shouldn't you? Zhang Hao suddenly sneered as he rebuked, looking at Yang Kai. Could it be you think that you are invincible in this world and everyone here is beneath you? His words had dragged everyone into this mess in one go, causing all of them to direct their anger towards Yang Kai. Although it was obvious Zhang Hao was instigating discord, Yang Kai's attitude was indeed over the top. So what if I think you are beneath me? Come and bite me. Yang Kai coldly glared at Zhang Hao, who didn't know that an early bird is shot first. Zhang Hao coldly snorted, but he wasn't angry. Rather, he looked at Yang Kai with a grin and a cold expression on his face. Where is my junior sister Yu Ying? Someone suddenly asked. Yang Kai raised his brow, turning his gaze towards the speaker. Immediately, a weird look appeared on his face as this person was none other than Yin Lisheng. This is interesting. I have been looking for him, and now he came to me first, but the first thing he asks is about Yu Ying. How did he know about Yu Ying having been with me? I've already changed my appearance. However, very soon, realization dawned upon Yang Kai as he took a deep look at Zhang Hao, realizing that he had been recognized after making a move just now. Long time no see. Who would have thought that you would have grown to this level? Yin Lisheng looked at Yang Kai coldly while inside he was feeling quite shocked. Apparently, he already knew of his real identity. After all, Zheng Zhenyong had sent him some information earlier, revealing some news about this newcomer. It was precisely because of this that Yin Lisheng looked shocked. He could cultivate to the third order Dao Source realm because of the vigorous support of an entire sect and the teachings of a powerful master. He didn't believe that Yang Kai was blessed with such luck. If Yang Kai didn't have such conditions and could still cultivate to the same level as him, it was evident that Yang Kai had encountered a great opportunity. You aren't bad either, Yang Kai sneered. Since his identity had been revealed, it didn't make sense to hide anymore, so he simply reached out and took off his mask, immediately revealing his real appearance. Peak, Chapter 2453, Murdering with a Borrowed Knife. Published by Divine Dao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Sure enough, it's you. Yin Lisheng's expression suddenly changed. Coming face to face with his enemy, his eyes started flashing fire and he gritted his teeth and added, "You're pretty sturdy. Not only did you survive the disaster back then, but you also came to the Shattered Star Sea." Yang Kai glared at him coldly before asking in a grim voice, "Yin Lisheng, I'll just ask you one question, you better answer me honestly. Where is the puppet that was with me back then?" Yin Lisheng slightly smiled upon hearing this before responding, "Who knows? Since it's your puppet, why are you asking me?" As expected, he does know about Coco. Yang Kai's brow twitched. Although Yin Lisheng didn't directly answer Yang Kai's question, Yang Kai could tell from his tone and demeanor. Yang Kai immediately became furious and he glared at him and stated, "It seems that you're not going to tell me." Yin Lisheng rebuked with a grin, "Since you know it, why bother asking?" Good. Yang Kai nodded as his aura instantly became extremely ferocious, like a cheetah ready to pounce on its prey, causing everyone present to shudder. "Since you aren't going to tell me, this young master will beat you until you start speaking." Yin Lisheng's face turned ashen as he spoke. "Do you really think you are invincible in this world?" "I admit I'm not invincible in this world, but pinching you to death will not be a problem." Yin Lisheng broke into laughter instead of getting angry. "You think so? Why? Because you are a Star Master." "What? Brother Yin, what did you just say? Is this brat really a Star Master? Aren't Star Masters cultivators who came from lower star fields? Who would have thought that this little brat would be one of them? I heard that all Star Masters have an intact star source, giving him a unique advantage in cultivating the heavenly way and martial Dao. I wonder if it's true or false." Upon hearing that Yang Kai was a Star Master, all the cultivators in the vicinity broke into pandemonium. They stared at Yang Kai with a heated gaze, as if they were looking at a huge piece of fresh meat. Everyone had come to the Shattered Star Sea in search of source strength, but the source strength here was all from mere shattered star sources, nothing more. Although absorbing and refining these shattered sources would still provide him an edge in cultivation, at the end of the day, they were still just broken remnants. How could they be comparable to an intact star source? An intact star source could give them a better comprehension of world principles, something an incomplete star source couldn't. For a long time, there had been rumors that there were intact star sources in the Shattered Star Sea, but with the repeated opening of the Shattered Star Sea over time, these intact star sources had long found their owners. The remaining star sources were all broken. Perhaps after a few more openings, even these incomplete star sources in the Shattered Star Sea would be carved up or dissipate. When that time came, the Shattered Star Sea would lose its current use and appeal to cultivators. That was why everyone's reaction was so over the top when they heard that Yang Kai was a Star Master. Yin Lisheng confirmed with a laugh, "This boy is indeed a Star Master. This Yin can personally guarantee this." Everyone gave him a weird look upon hearing this. Lan He coldly snorted and said, "How ridiculous. Does the Netherworld sect have no honor? Yangkai had saved her life before, so now that Yangkai was about to be targeted, she would naturally speak up on his behalf. It was quite evident that she wanted to advance and retreat with him now. Yin Lesheng turned gloomy as he looked around and stated, "If you don't believe me, you can ask him, what was his cultivation 7 years ago?" A burly man immediately turned to Yangkai and asked, "Little brat, didn't you hear him? Quickly answer the question." Although Yangkai's previous act of killing a cultivator of the same level was very daunting, he was all alone. At this moment, with so many people targeting him, everyone believed that no matter how strong Yangkai was, he couldn't raise any more waves. Yangkai gave a sidelong glance at the burly man before rebuking him with a cold snort, "None of your damn business." He didn't place any importance on the burly man at all, making the burly man go livid in anger. Yin Lesheng continued with a smile, 7 years ago, he was only a second-order origin king. Brother Yang, did I remember it correctly? Second-order origin king. How is that possible? From second-order origin king to third-order Dao Source realm in just 7 years. How is this possible? Brother Yin, are you lying to us? A second-order origin king actually reached the third-order Dao Source realm in just 7 years. Such a rate of progress was simply terrifying. Comparatively, everyone here had at most advanced by a minor realm over the past 7 years, if they advanced at all. Ying Lesheng stated, "What good does it do for me to lie to you? Other opportunities might have played some part in helping him reach this level, but being a Star Master provided him with the greatest edge. I have long heard that all the cultivators from lower starfields are geniuses, especially the Star Masters. Their cultivation is as fast as flying. If Brother Yin is right, then you have really opened up my eyes today. You're believing the words of a Netherworld sect disciple. Can't you see that Yin Lesheng has a grudge with this guy? He even went so far as to specifically point out that he is a Star Master. Clearly, he wants to murder with a borrowed knife. I can see that, but who doesn't want an intact Star Source? If I can get it." Endless whispers could be heard everywhere, but Yang Kai just sneered as he took a sidelong glance at Yin Lesheng and stated, "You have been talking only about me, why does Brother Yin talk about himself as well? You were just a third-order origin king 7 years ago, am I right?" Yin Lesheng responded with a smile, "So what?" As soon as he confirmed this, many people looked at Yin Lesheng in surprise. Yang Kai had spent 7 years advancing from second-order origin king to the third-order Dao Source realm. That was already amazing enough, but they didn't expect for Yin Lesheng's progress to be not much worse than his. Compared to these two, everyone suddenly felt they were somewhat mediocre. Yin Lesheng spoke in an open and confident manner, "There is no harm in telling you. This Yin is in fact, also a Star Master, so I can clearly tell how quickly a Star Master cultivates." When he confirmed this, everyone glanced at him with an extremely heated gaze. Yin Lesheng saw this and coldly snorted, "However, I am different from this brat. This Yin is the legacy disciple of the sect master of the Netherworld sect. Before you make a move on me, you'd best first consider the consequences." Hearing this, many people's expressions changed, and after a moment, many shook their heads as they looked away from Yin Lesheng. As a Star Master, Yin Lesheng was also a very attractive target. However, he was a legacy disciple of a top sect, so he certainly had a lot of life-saving cards up his sleeve. If they really fought a life and death battle with him, they might even lose their rice while trying to steal a chicken. On the contrary, Yang Kai was easier to deal with. However, it was precisely because Yin Lesheng admitted that he was a Star Master that his previous statement became more convincing. Everyone's gaze toward Yang Kai became more and more heated. Yin Lesheng broke into laughter as he mocked Yang Kai. "Yang Kai, there was a path to the heavens but you refused to take it, instead you forced open the gates of hell. With so many heroes present today, I want to see how you are going to escape." Yang Kai remained calm and composed as he scoffed, "How shameless, you want to murder me with a borrowed knife. Who asked you to have an intact Star Source?" Yin Lesheng remained indifferent as he shouted, "Everyone, my Netherworld sect has a secret technique that can completely remove the Star Source from a Star Master, resulting in no loss at all. If any friend can take him down, he can ask for this Yin's help to strip the Star Source from him. This Yin guarantees that he will do his best and will not do anything selfish. Ha ha, since Brother Yin has said so, then I can rest assured. I was just wondering how I could snatch his Star Source after killing this little brat. It turns out that the Netherworld sect has such an amazing secret technique." The burly man, who had been disdained by Yang Kai before, burst into laughter. Yin Lesheng stated, "This guy is pretty strong. If you want his Star Source, you better attack him together." Now, he was nakedly urging everyone to deal with Yangkai together. Although the cultivators present here didn't like his approach, before the temptation of a complete star source, they couldn't help but be moved. What's more, Yangkai's previous arrogant and domineering attitude had irked them greatly. In an instant, several dozen auras locked onto Yangkai, causing a suffocating pressure. Lan He, who was standing next to Yangkai, had turned pale as she furrowed her brow. She might be strong, but she had never been an enemy of so many people at once. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel a little uneasy, uncertain about her future as she quietly sized up Yangkai. When she did so, though, Lan He couldn't help but be surprised. Because Yangkai was standing there in a completely calm and composed manner. There wasn't the slightest bit of fear or timidity in him. The dozens of auras locked on him were like a spring breeze to him. They didn't deter or affect him in the slightest. He has impressive mental strength. Lan He was secretly shocked. Her initial impression of Yangkai was quite bad. She had thought that he was a perverted and petty man, but after Yangkai saved her life, she looked at him in a new light. After all, so many people were enjoying the show just now, while Yangkai was the only one to help her. What's more, he had no prior relationship with her, so him taking a stand to help her had warmed her heart. Now that the situation had changed, and it was now Yangkai who was being targeted by everyone, Lan He could not sit idly by. Just when she had secretly made up her mind to help Yangkai, he suddenly spoke to her in a low voice, "Sister Lan, leave this place first." Lan He furrowed her brow upon hearing this and she immediately asked in a shout, "Why? Brother Yang, are you looking down on this Lan He?" Yangkai was taken aback. He gazed at her and asked, "When did I say that?" Lan He asked, snorting, "Then why are you driving me away? Since you drew a sword to help me first, then Lan He can't feign uninvolvement here. Don't worry, if they dare to gang up on you, I will help you, and I won't drag you down." Yangkai looked at her in a daze before stating, "You'll die." Lan He's tender body momentarily shuddered, but she soon composed herself and stated in a loud and firm voice, "If I'm going to die, then so be it. I still won't leave." A different look flashed in Yangkai's eyes as he swept his gaze over Lan He several times, as if he was just coming to know the real her. Suddenly, a stunned look appeared on his face as he asked, "Sister Lan He is from the Heavenly Wolf Valley, right?" "That's right." Lan He agreed with a nod, wondering why Yangkai was asking her this at this moment of life and death. In the end, it seems he was still a strange man. Chapter 2454, Gone Crazy. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligakes. "I remember the Heavenly Wolf Valley now," Yangkai smiled and stated, "When this is over, I have something to ask of Sister Lan. I hope Sister Lan will not refuse." Lan He bitterly replied, "If we survive, I will promise you as long as it's not too much." "Don't worry, we won't die," Yangkai burst into laughter. Lan He weirdly looked at him. She didn't know where he was getting the confidence to speak such big words. Was he so blind that he can't see that he is surrounded by several dozen Dao Source Realm Masters? These people were not ordinary cultivators, they were all elite disciples of great forces. If they teamed up, even an ordinary Emperor Realm Master wouldn't be their opponent. Did he think he was better than an emperor? "Little brat, you still continue to shamelessly boast." That burly man suddenly shouted in anger. Suddenly, an axe appeared in his hand with a flip of his wrist. Pushing his source chi into the artifact, the aura and pressure exuded by it reached an extraordinary height as he continued, "If you know what's good for you, you better surrender without a fight and I may leave your corpse intact. But if you dare to remain stubborn." Thu. Yangkai opened his mouth and spat straight toward that burly man, launching the spitball like an arrow from a bow. The yelling man's face immediately changed as he hurriedly dodged to one side. Although the spit wasn't lethal, it would be too disgusting to be spat upon. After regaining his footing, the burly man rebuked with a cold face, "Are you a child? You actually spat at me. Don't you think it's shameful?" Yangkai sneered as he countered, "So many of you are targeting me, and you still don't think that's shameful, but I spat on you and you called me shameless. How ridiculous." Yin Lesheng snorted and stated, "Whatever you say, you are going to die today for sure." "Is that so?" Yangkai coldly glared at him, he then raised his foot and took a step forward as he majestically proclaimed, "Then this young master likes to see who is blind enough to dare to make a move against him. Let this young master warn you, if anyone dares to make a move, I will make him die here today." Once he said this, everyone's expression changed as a serious look appeared on their faces. The amazing strength displayed by Yang Kai earlier was still vivid in their mind, so although it seemed that he was just trying to give them a scare and couldn't back up his words, it was still somewhat daunting. They were afraid that he would fight a desperate battle if pushed too far, which would cost them dearly. In a flash, several dozen cultivators stood rooted in place. No one was willing to be the first to act and subsequently, the first to die. They were waiting for the others to make a move first so they could become the fishermen and take advantage of the fight between Snipe and Clam. Yin Lesheng could clearly spot this and his face turned gloomy as he shouted, "Since you are being so timid and fearful, after this Yin has snatched his star source, you should not get jealous." When he said this, he suddenly stretched his hand out and shouted, "Netherworld Purgatory Hand." A sinister gale immediately appeared, followed by eerie cries and howls. The next moment, an enormous ghost suddenly appeared and rushed towards Yang Kai with a ferocious look on its face. This ghost had yet to reach him, but a cold feeling rose from inside Yang Kai as if even his blood was going to be frozen. Before he could react, Lan He, who was standing next to him, suddenly yelled, "Heavenly Wolf Moon." A deafening wolf howl rang out, and as Lan He pointed forward, a powerful silver wolf phantom appeared out of thin air. This wolf was enormous, as if it was a true heavenly wolf. Next, it opened its enormous jaws and bit toward the ghost. In a flash, the two enormous entities clashed with each other, fighting crazily. And at the same time Yin Lesheng made his move, the several Netherworld sect disciples around him also attacked. Zhang Hao and Zhang Xian of Brahma Holy Land glanced at each other before quickly forming hand seals as they used their own secret techniques. As soon as the others saw someone taking the lead, they no longer watched from the sidelines. One after another, they summoned their artifacts, or displayed some secret techniques to attack Yang Kai. In a flash, the void glittered with colorful glows as energy fluctuations undulated everywhere. Lan He immediately turned pale and stood rooted on the spot, dazed. Her eyes seemed to have lost their luster. With so many Dao Source Realm Masters attacking together, she was completely powerless to resist. Only death was waiting for her. At that moment, Yang Kai suddenly let out a fierce roar. Immediately, a dazzling flash of light blinded everyone before a wide broadsword appeared in Yang Kai's hand. The next moment, a majestic emperor pressure filled the void as Yang Kai assumed a firm stance like a towering and immovable mountain. He slowly turned the long sword in his hand as he shouted, "Myriad sword arts, one man is a mountain." Asterisk chi chi chi. Countless sword auras suddenly shot from the long sword, greeting the oncoming attacks like locusts. Deafening explosions immediately rang out as the sight of countless energy collisions created a shocking scene before everyone's eyes. Emperor artifact. Where is this brat from? He actually has an Emperor artifact as well. Don't let him go, kill him. Although many of the cultivators who had entered the Shattered Star Sea were either elite disciples of major sects, or descendants and legacy disciples of sect masters and elders, Emperor artifacts were still a rarity among them. Apart from a few top elites who owned an Emperor artifact, no one else was eligible to have one. At this moment, seeing Yang Kai actually take out an Emperor artifact, the blood of several dozen cultivators started boiling. In their opinion, Yang Kai was simply a huge treasure trove. Not only did he have a complete star source, he also had an Emperor artifact. If they could kill him and snatch his treasures, they would instantly become rich. They would be the proud owner of an Emperor artifact. In a flash, a fire was lit in everyone's heart. After the clash, Yang Kai too staggered back as a sweet and sour taste flooded his throat and spurted out of his mouth. He barely resisted the joint attacks of several dozen cultivators thanks to the might of the myriad swords, but he was all alone in the end, so how could he contend with so many people? He could resist their attacks all because they hadn't used their full strength just now, otherwise Yang Kai would not have only suffered minor injuries. Damn you all, you actually dare to jointly attack me. Yang Kai turned livid with rage as he glared around and shouted, grinding his teeth. Yin Lesheng snorted and said, "It's too late to beg for mercy, you are going to die today." Zhang Hao anxiously demanded, "Quickly hand over the Emperor artifact." Although the others didn't say anything, the greedy look in their eyes was enough to tell what was going in their minds. Yang Kai grimly smiled before he suddenly teleported to the front of the mountains and rivers bell. Yin Lesheng's expression changed as he asked in shock, "What are you doing?" Yang Kai broke into a burst of loud laughter as he shouted, "What am I doing? Isn't it obvious? I told you before, if anyone dares to attack me, I will make him die without a burial." He swept a cold gaze through the crowd with a crazed look on his face. "Are you crazy?" Yin Lesheng seemed to have guessed Yang Kai's intentions and his face turned pale while the others were also shocked as their thoughts all froze. Yang Kai's face and eyes turned colder as he stated in a frigid voice, "You forced me to do this." As he spoke, he lifted the myriad swords up high all of a sudden. "Wait, we can talk about this, there's no need to act rash." Zhang Hao yelled in horror. "You want to talk now? Too late. Go to hell," Yang Kai shouted as he ruthlessly swung the myriad sword at the mountains and rivers bell. "It's over." Yin Lisheng's forehead was immediately covered in large beads of cold sweat at the sight of this, and he turned around and rushed back without even looking back. "Run!" Zhang Hao also screamed, "This brat has gone insane." Hong. As the myriad sword struck the mountains and rivers bell, a reverberating tone immediately rang out before sound waves visible to the naked eyes began to propagate outwards. Yang Kai was the first to bear the brunt of this pulse, and even though he circulated his source chi to defend himself, he couldn't help but stagger. He almost fainted on the spot as he spurted a mouthful of blood. Dozens of Dao Source Realm masters had their backs to Yang Kai at this moment, only wanting to escape from this place but unable to do so. They were trapped inside a natural spirit array, one that had no easy way out, so even if they desperately fled, it was a fruitless attempt. When the sound wave spread, they were swept up in it at once. On the dark red star before, a young man had only touched the mountains and rivers bell lightly and was blasted to death as a result. But now, Yang Kai had used an emperor artifact to strike the mountains and rivers bell with all his strength, causing a shock wave that couldn't be compared with the previous one. After being struck by the sound wave, everyone spurted blood and all of their defensive artifacts grew a lot dimmer. Not only that, but the sound wave seemed to have the power to suppress and lock. After the sound wave swept through everyone, they froze in place as if they were trapped in a quagmire, unable to move at all. Hong. Before they could take a breath of respite, another deafening knell rang. Everyone's heart shuddered as they turned their heads and saw that Yang Kai had struck the mountains and rivers bell again. He had a horrifying look on his face and was frantically laughing. "How are you feeling? Better? Tell me loudly, how does it feel?" "Madman, he's a madman. This guy has lost his mind. You bunch of wastes, why would you think of provoking someone so crazy? If he keeps this up, everyone will be killed along with him." Stop, we can talk it out. Don't do this, please. Brother Yang, it's better to get rid of an enmity than keep it alive. Rather than dying with everyone, it's better to sit down and talk it out. Watching that terrifying sound wave sweep over again, everyone started crying and screamed. Each of them hated Yang Kai to death, but they were forced to please him with a smiling face even against their will. I'm not listening. Over on Yang Kai's side, he spat another mouthful of blood as he shook his head wildly. The third time he raised his myriad sword, he shouted, "I'm making a profit by taking you guys all with me. So, don't think about leaving alive today. Senior Yang, I am willing to offer my space ring, please spare my life." Someone suddenly shouted. Yang Kai paused for a moment before he snorted and shouted with a voice filled with righteous indignation, "Do you think this young master is someone who is moved at the sight of money? Don't disgrace this young master's character." That man was dumbstruck. He didn't know how to reply. Yang Kai quickly asked, "What treasures are in the ring?" "Everyone." That speaker was also stunned. He didn't know what Yang Kai meant until a cultivator next to him secretly kicked him. The man suddenly came to realize and hurriedly replied, "There are many, many great treasures inside. I guarantee that Senior Yang will be satisfied." Yang Kai suddenly smiled and stated, "You should have said so earlier, you wouldn't have suffered then. Tell me, aren't you a miserable wretch?" Yes, I'm a miserable wretch." The corner of that man's lips twitched as he agreed. Chapter 2455, You Want to Fight Me One-on-One. Published by Divine Dao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligakis. If that's the case, then I will spare your dog life. Yang Kai coldly snorted. Then he turned to Lan He and ordered, "Sister Lan, go and get his space ring." Me. Lan He was taken aback. Although she didn't feel very good about this, she knew that it was a little inconvenient for Yang Kai to move right now, so all she could do was nod, fly to that cultivator and stretch her hand out. The cultivator took off the space ring with a painful look on his face and reluctantly handed it over to Lan He. Yang Kai shouted with a stoic face, "Who wants to buy their life? If you want to buy it, hurry up before it's too late." Isn't he taking advantage of our difficulties to rob us? Boy, don't go too far. There are several dozen of us, don't think we're really afraid of you. I advise you to exercise prudence. Yes, yes. Brother Yang, when it's possible to forgive others, one should be forgiving. You should always leave a way out for yourself, only this way, your future will be broader and wider. When it's possible to forgive others, one should be forgiving. Yang Kai sneered before he showed contempt and rebuked, I didn't see you forgive me just now. But now, what's the use of this nonsense? I'll say it one last time. If you want to buy your life, hurry up and cooperate, otherwise don't blame this young master for being ruthless and making you die here. As he spoke, he raised the myriad sword high again, taking the stance as if he was about to strike again. The several dozen Dao Source Realm cultivators' faces turned incomparably ugly. Yang Kai had only knocked the mountains and rivers bell twice, yet most of the cultivators here were already injured. However, inside this natural spirit array, they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. If this went on a few more times, they would really die here. Don't compromise. The weaker you act, the more he is going to take advantage of you. Never compromise with him. If you join hands with him, you still may not be able to survive. Yin Lisheng suddenly shouted. Among everyone, he was the last one who wanted to see Yang Kai flaunt his prowess. Therefore, when he saw someone trying to compromise, he instantly became anxious. Brother Yin is really firm and unyielding, very good. Yang Kai looked at him and sneered deeply, then, this young master will wait and see for how long will you remain this staunch. Yin Lisheng's face turned gloomy so much that one could almost shave off a layer of frost from his face. His expression was extremely ugly to look at. As soon as the topic was changed, Yang Kai quickly stated, I'll only count to 3, after 3, if you still won't obediently cooperate, then you can all be on your way to hell. 1. 2. Before Yang Kai could even count to 3, someone shouted, Brother Yang, I'm willing to hand you my space ring, please let me live. Good. Yang Kai turned his gaze and looked at the speaker before ordering, take the ring off and stand aside. Lan He walked up to the man without a word and stretched her hand out. After that man handed over the space ring, he immediately flew to one side. I am also willing to hand over my space ring. Me too. Me too. There is nothing good inside anyway. It's better than death. In a flash, handing space rings over to buy their lives had almost become the general trend. Among several dozen cultivators, most of them had soon chosen to surrender their space rings. Lan He's mood was extremely complicated. She had thought she would definitely die this time. After all, her enemies were several dozen Dao Source Realm masters. But the situation quickly turned around. She and Yang Kai, who were supposed to be at an absolute disadvantage, had their positions reversed and were now leading the same several dozen cultivators around by their noses. All of this was too abrupt, but it was all Yang Kai's credit. In the face of several dozen Dao Source Realm cultivators, he didn't panic or become intimidated. Instead he used the mountains and rivers bell to deter the enemy, bravely and smartly forcing his opponents into a position where they could neither advance or retreat. It was the first time Lan He had met such a courageous and cunning man. In a short while, she had already received more than 20 space rings. She was the eldest senior sister of Heavenly Wolf Valley and had witnessed many great scenes and storms, yet she was still trembling in excitement a little at this moment. Each of these 20 space rings was filled with enormous amounts of treasure. These were the space rings of elite disciples of top sects, each of them stuffed with wealth. Lan He could hardly imagine the amount of money in these 20 space rings. After another while, those hesitating cultivators didn't dare to tarry any longer. Yang Kai had raised the Emperor artifact right next to the mountains and rivers bell, so who knows when he would knock it again. All of them could only take off their space rings in humiliation and hand him over to Lan He. They secretly decided in their hearts that they would make Yang Kai know of the consequences of offending them once they escaped from here. The several dozen Dao Source Realm cultivators, who had originally teamed up, were now divided into 2 camps. One that was handing over their space rings, and the other filled with those who were still acting stubborn. The cultivators who were stubborn weren't that many, however, only 5 in total. Yang Kai glanced at them and noticed that all these people were the disciples of the Netherworld sect and Brahma Holy Land. Next, Yang Kai sneered at Zhang Hao, it seems Holy Son Zhang Hao wants to die here. Zhang Hao furrowed his brow and stated, Brother Yang, how about we discuss this? Why don't you let me and Zhang Xian just leave? We will remember today's kindness and repay you some other time. Some other time. Yang Kai sneered and said with a cold look plastered on his face, the matters of some other time should be discussed some other time. For now, all I want are your space rings. Zhang Hao stated, Brother Yang, do you really need to do this? You have already offended over 20 sects, how will you gain a footing in the star boundary in the future? Yang Kai said with a deep nod, hearing this, Brother Zhang Hao makes sense. I hadn't considered this. Zhang Hao was gleeful hearing this, but before he could say anything, Yang Kai continued. You mean to say, after I take the treasure, I should silence everyone? TSK, brother Zhang Hao is truly vicious. As expected, just as the sea cannot be measured by a bushel, a man cannot be judged by his appearance. Zhang Hao wiped off the cold sweat of his forehead as he hastily added, Brother Yang, you misunderstand, how could I think of inciting Brother Yang to go back on his words and do such a thing? Wouldn't I be ruining Brother Yang's reputation? I only wanted to say that it's better to have more friends than enemies. Brother Yang, what do you think? You want to be friends with me? Yang Kai slightly smiled. Zhang Hao cupped his fists and said, if Brother Yang does not mind, he. I do mind. You're not worthy to be my friend. Yang Kai's face turned colder as he rebuked, glaring at him. Zhang Hao's smile turned stiff as his flash flushed red. He was extremely embarrassed. As a holy son of Brahma Holy Land, he could be considered a leader of the younger generation in the star boundary, yet he wasn't worthy of being friends with Yang Kai. This brat was just a Dao Source realm cultivator, yet he dared to boast so shamelessly. And before so many people, too. How could this not cause Zhang Hao to lose all face? His heart was burning with flames of fury. Zhang Xian, who was standing next to him, also had an ugly look on his face. He and Zhang Hao both were holy sons, so Yang Kai slapping Zhang Hao's face like this made him also feel hot in his cheeks, as if he too had been ruthlessly slapped too. Brother Yang, you refuse to realize the errors of your ways. Zhang Hao snorted. Yang Kai snorted back and declared, if you keep up with your nonsense, this young master will take your dog life first. Good, we will remember this. I hope you can still be as arrogant as you are today the next time we meet. Zhang Hao dropped a ruthless sentence before Zhang Xian and Zhang Hao took off their space rings and threw them to Lan Hen. They then turned around and joined the crowd on the other side. Yang Kai grinned and said, you only know how to bullshit. If you had the guts, you could come up and fight this young master right now. This young master will teach you how to show proper respect. Zhang Hao stopped for a moment. He was almost provoked by Yang Kai to turn around and make a move, but fortunately, he suddenly remembered the scene of Yang Kai instantly killing a cultivator in the same realm just a moment ago. Before such a terrifying opponent, he asked himself whether he was his opponent. But the only answer he got was even if Zhang Xian and he attacked Yang Kai together, they could only remain undefeated at best, that's all. Another miserable wretch who is only willing to cooperate after being severely educated by this young master, Yang Kai sneered. Zhang Xian suddenly turned and said, looking at Lan He, Sister Lan He, although I don't know what your relationship with Brother Yang is, you have to be more careful. Zhang Hao and I saw him living together with Yu Ying from the Netherworld sect in the same room. Yu Ying's clothes were disheveled when she came out of her flight-type artifact, and you know very well what kind of woman Yu Ying is. Everyone is an Eastern Territory sect's disciple, so I hope you don't fall into this devil's hands. Yang Kai's face turned ashen after hearing this and quickly declared, you dare to drive a wedge between us. This young master and Yu Ying are pure and innocent, don't soil my reputation. Zhang Xian chuckled and stated, Yu Ying said the same thing before. After saying so, he walked into the crowd without looking back. Lan He frowned her black brow as he glanced at Yang Kai, a weird look on her face. Yang Kai righteously asked, Sister Lan He, you wouldn't believe him, would you? Lan He stated, Brother Yang, as long as you have a clear conscience, it's okay. It's none of my business. Yang Kai thought for a moment before agreeing with a nod, good. After they were finished, he turned to Yin Lisheng and stated with a crafty grin, Brother Yin, now there are only a few of you left. Tell me, are you going to cooperate? How about you? And, you? The remaining three were all the disciples of Netherworld sect. Yin Lisheng had a very high status in the Netherworld sect. After all, he was the sect master's legacy disciple, so even if his duration in the sect was short, he was still in charge. Since he hadn't made a statement, the other two disciples couldn't make a decision either. Yin Lisheng proudly smiled and stated, this Yin least likes others threatening him, and anyone who has dared to, didn't have a good end. Yang Kai's eyes lit up and he said, coincidentally, I am the same as Brother Yin regarding this. Yin Lisheng stated, prideful people always have a lot in common. Yang Kai, if you really want my space ring, you have to fight with me. If you win, this Yin will offer you his space ring with both hands. You want to fight me one-on-one? Yang Kai looked at him, narrowing his eyes. Is Brother Yang afraid? Yin Lisheng sneered. Yang Kai stated with a snort, since Brother Yin is being so refined, then this young master will give you a chance. Once Yang Kai said this, Yin Lisheng happily smiled. Although Yang Kai had shown extraordinary strength before, Yin Lisheng was confident that he would remain undefeated. This was also why he could talk with ease and fluency with Yang Kai, and didn't panic despite being trapped in the natural spirit array. If he wanted to leave here, he could leave at any moment. However, he would have to pay a hefty price. He wasn't willing to do that unless it was a last resort. Chapter 2456, Asura Earth Demon. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Originally, Yin Lisheng thought that a treacherous person like Yang Kai would definitely not agree to his challenge. At that time, he could only severely humiliate Yang Kai, and speak all kinds of slander, but contrary to his expectation, Yang Kai had actually accepted. He was ecstatic. He might not be confident about being Yang Kai's opponent head-on, but he had an ace up his sleeve, and once he resorted to it, Yang Kai would definitely die. Yin Lisheng secretly decided in his mind that as soon as the fight with Yang Kai began, he would directly use his trump card, not giving Yang Kai any chance to resist. Just as his imagination was running wild, Yang Kai suddenly pointed at the several dozen cultivators beside him and stated, "Since Brother Yin likes to fight solo, then you can fight with these friends. I believe they will definitely accompany you. Have fun." Yin Lisheng was dumbstruck after hearing this. The several dozen cultivators were also taken aback. Lan He too was similarly rooted on her spot, in a daze. Zhang Hao's face turned cold as he grimly rebuked, "Yang Kai, don't go too far. We have handed you our space rings, what else do you want?" "That's right. You should resolve your grievance with Yin Lisheng yourself, why drag us into your fight?" Zhang Xian too shouted before stating in a firm voice, "We will never help you." Yeah, don't treat us as fools." The group of cultivators immediately started clamoring, criticizing Yang Kai. Yin Lisheng sneered, "Brother Yang, if you don't have the guts to fight me, no one will laugh at you. Why bother beating around the bush?" Yang Kai meaningfully grinned and justified himself. "Brother Yin is the legacy disciple of the Eastern Territories Netherworld sect master, whereas I, Yang Kai, am a lone man with no support. Of course I don't have the guts to fight with you. If I accidentally killed you, wouldn't I be inviting a disaster? If you don't have the guts to fight with Yin Lisheng, why should we? We won't." "That's right, we won't. If you want to beat him, do it yourself. You are really treating us like idiots. This brat is simply insatiable. How ridiculous." Everyone was extremely dissatisfied with Yang Kai because they were forced to hand over their space rings, and now, this brat actually wanted to make them deal with Yin Lisheng as well. Why should they? Each and every one of them started shouting in indignation. Lan He looked worriedly at Yang Kai, afraid that he would make things go out of hand. He was already threatening everyone with the mountains and rivers bell, and it was nothing short of a miracle that he had obtained so many space rings. If he did something even more excessive, it might bring some unnecessary trouble. She furtively winked at Yang Kai, signaling him to not be too greedy, lest it was too late. Yang Kai ignored her, unfortunately, and stated with a cold look on his face, "You probably didn't hear what I said at the beginning, did you?" "What did you say? Boy, just speak, what do you want to do?" Yang Kai stated with a snort, "This young master said that whoever dares to not hand over their space rings, this young master will make him die." "Yes, you did say that. But I've already handed over my space ring. What do you want now?" Yang Kai said, "Now Yin Lisheng is unwilling to cooperate, so this young master wants him dead. Do you have any objections?" Zhang Hao answered, "Of course not. You and Brother Yin can resolve your grievances by yourselves, without involving us." "Good." Yang Kai grinned before shouting, "This young master will now use this mountains and rivers bell to beat this bastard Yin Lisheng to death. If you still want to survive, quickly leave this place. This young master will not stop you." "What? Again?" "No, Brother Yang, calm down." Once Yang Kai said this, everyone turned pale in shock. Yang Kai sneered and stated, "Since you have handed your space rings over, this young master means what he says and will spare your lives. Now, this young master only wants to deal with Yin Lisheng. If you don't want to die, quickly leave." Zhang Hao angrily shouted, "The natural array here is too complex. If we could leave, how could we be threatened by you? Yang Kai, aren't you talking nonsense?" Zhang Xian also shouted, "You should exercise moderation. You can't be shameless to this level." Yang Kai remained unaffected by all this and calmly stated, "None of my business. If you don't have the ability to leave, if you are shaken to death by the mountains and rivers bell, then you can only blame your bad luck. It has nothing to do with this young master. He then switched the topic and angrily shouted at Yin Lesheng, surnamed Yin, next year today will be the anniversary of your death. You can be on your way to hell. While speaking, he swung the myriad sword fiercely toward the mountains and rivers bell. Lan He's eyes widened in shock as she hastily circulated her source chi to defend herself. The crowd of cultivators also panicked and hurriedly shouted, one after another. Stop, stop. Damn it, quickly stop. We can talk it out. At worst, we will help you persuade Yin Lesheng. Yes, yes, we can talk with Yin Lesheng and ask him to hand over his space ring. In this havoc, Yangkai's myriad sword stopped less than a finger's width away from the mountains and rivers bell before he looked at the crowd and asked, You are going to talk with Yin Lesheng? Everyone was drenched in cold sweat as they repeatedly nodded after hearing this. Yangkai looked embarrassed as he stated, This surnamed Yin is very arrogant, he won't give in easily. If you just talk it out, I'm afraid it will be useless. Brother Yang may rest assured, if Brother Yin remains untactful, we will use harder methods to speak with him, someone stated with a ferocious look on his face. Yangkai stated, no. You have already handed your space rings over. Logically speaking, the next thing has nothing to do with you. How can I drag you all into my grievance with Yin Lesheng? Everyone's face turned black as if they stared at this hypocritical act. They were all cursing Yangkai their hearts furiously, but no one dared to speak their thoughts aloud. Brother Yang, don't mind it. Brother Yin is the one being untactful, so he should be taught a lesson. Only when the youngsters encounter some hardships will they understand how high the heavens are and how deep the earth goes. Yangkai's eyes lit up after hearing this as he said, If you insist, this Yang will have to trouble you all regarding this matter. Just know, I didn't force you. We are doing this voluntarily. Having finished speaking, the several dozen cultivators turned their heads and glared at Yin Lesheng. Yin Lesheng's face turned black like the bottom of a pot while the two Netherworld sect disciples next to him had also turned pale and become dumbstruck. Somehow, he and his team were now standing on the opposite side of everyone. They were simply caught unprepared. Yin Lesheng, be tactful and quickly hand over your space ring, otherwise everyone will die here. Yes, if you don't cooperate, then don't blame us for being impolite. Hand it over now. Everyone seemed to have been implicated because of Yin Lesheng's lack of cooperation, or perhaps because they were unlucky and they wanted others to be part of their misfortune too. Therefore, their attitude towards Yin Lesheng was far from good. Yin Lesheng was burning with fury and he asked with a sullen face, You are the elite disciples of top sects, the pride of your various forces, yet you've given up all your self-respect and allowed yourselves to be driven by one person's threats. Aren't you afraid that you will become a laughing stock if the word gets out? Many people's faces darkened after hearing this, looking embarrassed. Yangkai smiled and stated, Yin Lesheng is asking you to silence the witnesses so that no one will tell anyone about today's matter. Everyone's eyes lit up after hearing this. They secretly felt that it was a good idea. A fierce gleam even flashed past in a few people's eyes. Yin Lesheng's face darkened as he lashed out, Yangkai, you are such a despicable person. This Yin really misunderstood you. Yangkai rebuked with a snort, back then, when you intercepted and tried to kill me in the Starlight Corridor, you should have thought of the consequences. Yin Lesheng, gritting his teeth, warned, Don't force me. If I am backed into a corner, you won't have a good end. Yangkai jumped back and said, staring at him with widened eyes, I'm so sacred. He then turned his head and said, looking at the several dozen cultivators, This guy dares to threaten you. I don't know whether you can stand it or not, but anyway, I can't stand it. If I were you, I would rush to him and tear him to pieces. Even though they knew Yangkai was adding fuel to the fire and driving a wedge, everyone was still a little unhappy with Yin Lesheng's words as they were simply too much. Zhang Hao pondered for a while and stated, Brother Yin, a wise man, submits to the circumstances. I know you have the means and the cards, but do you really think you can be an enemy of so many of us? Zhang Hao, you are forcing me to. Yin Lesheng's eyes were shooting flames of fury and his voice was cold as ice. Both of them were disciples of sects of the Eastern Territory and had known each other for a long time. There might not be a friendship between them, but they all belonged to the Eastern Territory. It was fine for the others to compel him, but the fact that Zhang Hao too was acting so made Yin Lesheng extremely angry. Zhang Hao stated in a heavy voice, Brother Yin, it's not too late for a gentleman to take his revenge within 10 years. This is the Shattered Star Sea, there will be plenty of opportunities. He didn't transmit his voice but said it in an open and above-board manner in front of Yang Kai. Apparently, he too was holding a grudge, and wanted to find a chance to take revenge. Yang Kai disdainfully spat, looking completely indifferent to this. Yin Lisheng, maintaining a straight face, pondered for a while before agreeing with a nod. All right, this Yin will remember this. Yang Kai, I will make you pay for it 100 times over in the future. Yang Kai chuckled and stated, Brother Yin, you're a fish on a chopping board, and I am the knife. Is it okay to say such inflammatory words? Yin Lisheng glared at Yang Kai without speaking another word. Yang Kai snorted and requested, Sister Lan He, collect their space rings. Lan He nodded before walking up to Yin Lisheng and stretching her hand out. Yin Lisheng warned, Heavenly Wolf Valley, this Yin will remember you and will definitely visit you in the future. Lan He's face slightly changed. However, at this moment she knew that anything she said would be useless, so she simply took the space rings of the 3 Netherworld sect disciples, turned around, and left. After a while, she came to Yang Kai and said, There are a total of 46 space rings here. Brother Yang, you can count them. Yang Kai cheerfully took it and offered, Sister Lan He, you should also pick one. Lan He refused, shaking her head, I don't need it. I didn't do anything. Just as Yang Kai was about to say something, his face suddenly changed as fierce source chi fluctuations spread from him. Lan He was also shocked, having no idea what just happened to Yang Kai, but when she quickly scanned him, she noticed a wisp of black chi around his wrist. This black chi looked like a snake and was now traveling up Yang Kai's arm. Wherever it passed, Yang Kai's body rotted, revealing his bones, while the places corroded by the black chi made sizzling noises, causing the listener's skin to crawl. A rancid smell instantly filled the void. Asura Earth Demon. Lan He couldn't help but cry out in shock. Chapter 2457, Spatial Collapse. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligakis. Yang Kai's face had gone blue and he was constantly forming seals with his hands, pushing his source chi madly. After struggling for a while, the wisp of black chi was finally halted. But from the looks of it, half of his right arm had been terribly corroded. It was bloody all over and the blocked black chi was still thrashing about like a living creature, desperately trying to push towards Yang Kai's shoulder. Yang Kai fiercely raised his head and shouted in a grim voice, glaring at Yin Lisheng, You dare plot against me. At this moment, Yin Lisheng too was dumbstruck. That Asura Earth Demon was one of Netherworld sect's forbidden secret techniques. In each generation, only the top disciple could cultivate it. Furthermore, one needed to connect to the real Netherworld purgatory to cultivate it by refining an Earth Demon with Netherworld Yin Qi. Once one had cultivated it successfully, the might of this secret technique was astonishing, and basically, anyone below the Emperor realm would be completely powerless to resist it. Yin Lisheng had secretly hidden this wisp of Asura Earth Demon in his space ring, and when Yang Kai took it, he suddenly activated this secret technique. As he had expected, Yang Kai was afflicted. But what shocked Yin Lisheng was that Yang Kai actually blocked the progress of the Asura Earth Demon. Although he was injured, he hadn't suffered serious damage and there was no danger to his life. After a momentary shock, Yin Lisheng immediately regained his wits and his figure flickered as he pounced towards Yang Kai like a hawk spreading its wings. A fierce and hideous look appeared on his face as he shouted, This Yin always takes his revenge as quickly as possible. 10 years is too late for me. Yang Kai, go to hell. At the same time Yin Lisheng made his move, Zhang Hao and Zhang Xian also attacked together as their source chi surged. Who knows what kind of secret technique they used, but their figures merged into one as they flew towards Yang Kai with astonishing momentum, leaving a single long trail. Others also reacted quickly. One after another, they let out war cries as they rushed at Yang Kai. Having been forced to surrender their space rings, they were already burning with fury, so seeing Yang Kai get seriously injured after being sneak attacked by Yin Lisheng, they naturally seized this opportunity to take their revenge. Yang Kai, run. Lan He was startled, and seeing the situation change so quickly, she hurriedly urged Yang Kai. Yang Kai's face grimaced, who knows whether it was from pain or anger, but in a flash, a crazed look appeared on his face as he stated in a firm voice, We can't escape. He couldn't find the exit to this natural spirit array, and unless he had time to study it in peace, he wouldn't be able to get out of here anytime soon. As such, he promptly raised the myriad swords and swung it hard towards the mountains and rivers bell, fiercely shouting, You want my life? You can all die first. Hong. As the myriad sword struck the mountains and rivers bell, a halo suddenly appeared around it before a terrifying sound wave swept outwards, causing everyone's eyes to widen as they started screaming. But to everyone's surprise, the sound wave didn't travel far, instead just sending the nearby Yangkai flying. Ha ha ha, if disasters come from nature, something can be done to counter them, but if they are of one's own making, one is done for. Zhang Hao was overjoyed by this. Although he didn't know why the mountains and rivers bell reacted differently this time, in his opinion, right now was the best chance to kill Yangkai. He roared at the top of his voice, "Everyone, let's attack together. Let's make this surnamed Yang die without a burial." The rest of the people also had their spirits lifted and they immediately charged ahead, one after another. Yangkai was dazed. Having taken the full brunt of the shockwave, he couldn't tell north from south. The mountains and rivers bell's deviation had caught him by surprise too, and he couldn't understand what the artifact spirit's intentions were. At this juncture of life or death though, the mountains and rivers bell suddenly shook on its own, causing a spatial collapse along with it. This natural spirit array collapsed and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, a black hole of the size of a house appeared out of thin air. The mountains and rivers bell turned into a streak of light as it was sucked into the black hole, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The next moment, the black hole expanded at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, a tremendously powerful suction came from the black hole, pulling in all the nearby cultivators. What happened? What's going on? Damn it, quickly get out of here, the space here is collapsing. Surnamed Yang, you're not human. Everyone started yelling and screaming one after another. Everyone was panicking, and even Yin Lisheng, who was relentless about Yangkai's death, had a change in his expression. How could he still care about Yangkai's life or death in this situation? He promptly turned around and tried to escape. But the black hole's suction was irresistible. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make any forward progress, much less escape. With the rapid expansion of the black hole, its pull grew stronger and stronger, making every cultivator feel desperate and powerless. Yangkai and Lan He, who were closest to the black hole, were sucked in first and disappeared. After a while, screaming and panicking cultivators were swallowed into the black hole, one after another. In less than 10 breaths, each and every cultivator was pulled into the black hole. No one could escape it. And the black hole was still expanding. Until a certain moment, after the black hole expanded to a certain limit, it suddenly shrank back down and disappeared in a flash. The void had regained its peace, but strong space principle fluctuations remained behind, the only signs that an abnormal event had taken place here before. A dizzy Yangkai woke up sometime later and immediately heard Lan He's distressed cries. The pain coming from his arm was still unbearable and seemed to pierce straight through to his soul, making Yangkai feel like it was being torn apart. He had vaguely sensed the things going on before, but because he had borne the brunt of the mountains and rivers bell's sound wave, his consciousness had become blurry, so he hadn't been able to investigate his surroundings. He only saw the formation of a black hole and felt its powerful pull dragging him in. The next thing he knew, he was here. If he hadn't had a precious treasure like the soul-warming lotus, the shockwave alone from before would have been enough to extinguish his soul. As the shouts in his ears became clearer and clearer, Yangkai shook his head and finally regained some lucidity. He turned his head to look, but he couldn't see anything at all. There was no light here, just some chaotic nothingness, a familiar feeling to him. The void crack. Yangkai's eyes lit up as he cried out in surprise. Obviously, this was the interlayer of the void crack. The void existed everywhere in the world, but if one didn't understand the Tao of space, he or she couldn't detect its existence at all. It was also impossible for one to enter this place except in very special circumstances. Recalling the previous scene, Yangkai immediately understood the reason why he was here in the void. It was completely because of the sudden eruption of the mountains and rivers bell that shattered space with tremendous force. The black hole was the most obvious sign. Forcing his aching body up, Yangkai quickly spread his divine sense. As expected, he found Lan He not far away from him. At this moment, Lan He's situation was precarious, because she was caught in a void turbulence and was being sucked into it. The void was riddled with crises, but the biggest was undoubtedly void turbulences, which were like invisible rivers. These were chaotic confluences of chaotic space principles, and once anyone fell into one, it was very difficult to escape. The only end for someone who experienced such misfortune was being swallowed by this undercurrent. Even Yangkai had to be careful of these undercurrents while walking through the void. Although Lan He's cultivation was good, she had no understanding of the Tao of space, so after falling into a void turbulence, she was completely helpless and was only waiting for her death. Yangkai quickly came over to her and called out, "Sister Lanhe." Lanhe was slightly startled, and then responded in a low voice, "Yangkai." "Yes, it's me." Lanhe shouted, "I'm entangled by some kind of strange force. I can't get away, don't come closer." She was afraid that Yangkai would follow in her footsteps, so she quickly reminded her. Yangkai grinned and stated, "Don't worry, this is a void turbulence, I'll save you now." Lanhe refused, shaking her head, "No, I tried just now to escape. The harder one struggles, the faster they are pulled under, just like in a swamp. If you try to help me, it will be counterproductive. If you have a chance to leave this place, please go to Eastern Territory's Heavenly Wolf Valley, and give them a message. Tell them that Lanhe died here." She felt that she had no hope of surviving, so she began making arrangements for her funeral. Yangkai remained silent, got down on one knee and calmly started probing by her side. After a moment of silence, seeing Yangkai not give her a reply, Lanhe said in a dejected voice, "By the way, take my space ring and hand it to one of my Heavenly Wolf Valley disciples." While speaking, she took off her space ring. Yangkai suddenly stretched his hand out and patted the location where she was. Immediately, space principle fluctuations undulated, turning into an invisible force that affected the movement of the void turbulence. After a short while, the surging void turbulence became calm, and Yangkai then reached out his hand and fished Lanhe out. How? Lanhe didn't seem to believe that she was able to get out so easily. She couldn't help but remain rooted to her spot, but soon, she reacted and couldn't help but cry out, "You wouldn't happen to cultivate the Tao of space, do you?" Yangkai meaningfully grinned and modestly stated, "I understand a little bit." Shocked, Lanhe asked, "Are you Sir Li Wu Yi's disciple?" "It's that Li Wu Yi again." Yangkai had heard this name more than once and had long known that he was a famous master in the star boundary with a powerful third-order emperor realm cultivation. Moreover, Li Wu Yi was apparently proficient in the Tao of space. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this person was the first master under the 10 great emperors. Yangkai denied, shaking his head, "I have heard of him a long time ago, but I have never met him." He wasn't going to continue discussing this topic and immediately proposed, "I'll take you to a safer place first. I also have to heal myself." After Lanhe heard this, she recalled the scene of him being sneak attacked by Yin Lisheng and quickly stated, "The Asura Earth Demon is a forbidden secret technique of the Netherworld sect. Its corrosiveness is extremely strong. If anyone below the Emperor realm is hit by it, they are guaranteed to die. How can you be all right?" Yangkai chuckled and stated, "I'm lucky, or Yin Lisheng, that bastard, isn't that proficient in that technique." The Asura Earth Demon was indeed terrifying, and Yangkai reckoned that if he were any other Tao Source realm cultivator, he would really be unable to solve this problem. But Yangkai's strength was incomparable to an ordinary Tao Source realm cultivator's. Regardless of whether it was his physique, source chi, or his spiritual energy, everything was far beyond what an average Tao Source realm cultivator should possess, so Yangkai was somehow able to suppress the Asura Earth Demon. Even so, half of his arm was corroded beyond recognition. Peak, Chapter 2458, Eastern Territory Heavenly Wolf Valley. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. While leading Lanhe through the void, Yangkai suddenly stopped. Lanhe had no idea what was going on, and she didn't dare to bother him, so she just calmly stood by his side. After a while, Yangkai stated, "It's safe here, the space is relatively stable. Sister Lan, take a rest here while I heal my injuries. I will send you out after my injuries are healed." "Send me out." Lanhe was momentarily dumbstruck. However, remembering how easily Yangkai rescued her just now, she was filled with confidence in him. She nodded and said, "Good, don't worry about me, just focus on healing your injuries as soon as possible. The Asura Earth Demon's corrosiveness is incredibly powerful, and the longer it remains, the more troublesome it will be to deal with." Yangkai stretched his hand out and mobilized the surrounding space principles before speaking. "I have left a space seal here. If anything changes, I will be able to detect it at a moment's notice and come right away." After having said that, he turned around and flew to a nearby spot. After Yangkai left, Lanhe slowly sat down cross-legged and spread her divine sense to investigate the surrounding situation. She found that the space here was fairly stable as Yangkai had said, not like the chaotic situation she had encountered before. At that time, she didn't dare to make a rash move. All she could do was stay in her spot and wait. Not too far away from her location, Yangkai too sat down cross-legged and took out a bunch of healing pills from his space ring before stuffing them into his mouth like beans. His injuries weren't too serious in fact, the ones caused by the shock of the mountains and rivers bell having already mostly healed. The only problem was the Asura earth demon, which was like maggots on rotting bones, tightly wrapped around his arm. He had to circulate his source chi to force the power of the earth demon out of his body. Fortunately, his source chi was vigorous and pure, so even though this secret technique was extremely powerful, it could still be repelled. As time went on, bit by bit, Yangkai forced the power of the Asura earth demon out little by little. He looked meticulous and his movements were methodical. After 5 to 6 days, he finally heaved a deep breath. The Asura earth demon had completely dispersed now, but his corroded arm had still not been completely healed. Nevertheless, thanks to his tyrannical physique and restorative abilities, such injuries were basically nothing. After 5 to 6 days of recuperation, the injuries he had suffered from the mountains and rivers Bell's shockwave had also fully healed. Yangkai flung his arms as he slowly stood up, walking towards Lanhe's location. Not long after, he came to Lanhe's side and found her still sitting in a cross-legged position in her original spot. The space seal he had previously arranged didn't show any signs of being touched, indicating that this place had been peaceful for the past few days and wasn't affected by the local space principles. Sensing Yangkai's arrival, Lanhe stood up and asked, "Brother Yang, are you all right?" "Everything's fine now," Yangkai assured her with a smile. "That's good." Lanhe also heaved a sigh of relief, then immediately asked, "Can we go out now?" Yangkai replied, "But of course. Come, I will send you out." Lanhe was taken aback by his words and immediately asked, "What about you? Are you going to remain here?" Yangkai smiled and confidently stated, "I am quite familiar with this place, so I won't be in any danger. I want to find the mountains and rivers Bell that has also escaped into this void crack. I just don't know where to wander." "So, it's like that." Lanhe also knew that she couldn't try to persuade him too much. After all, she wasn't close with Yangkai. "Then I hope Brother Yang gets his wish fulfilled." "Many thanks for your kind words," Yangkai smiled. "Right." Lanhe suddenly remembered something and asked, "You said that you wanted to ask me about something, what was it?" After being reminded by her, Yangkai also remembered and smacked his head as he replied, "It's like this. I have a friend who has departed from the Northern Territory more than a year ago for your Heavenly Wolf Valley." "Brother Yang's friend? Is it to join our Heavenly Wolf Valley? But how come anyone from the Northern Territory wants to join us?" Lanhe was surprised after hearing this. If it was a cultivator of the Northern Territory, he or she would choose the Northern Territory's sects first. It made no sense to travel all the way to the Eastern Territory by trekking through mountains and rivers. After all, there was a huge distance between the two territories. If one didn't use cross-territory space arrays, one might not be able to arrive even after a few years. "It's a bit complicated. I will tell you about it along the way," Yangkai started explaining to her while he led Lanhe to find the weak point in the void crack. The friend he spoke of was naturally Ling Yin-chin. When the Holy Son of Brahma Holy Land, Zhang Hao, mentioned Heavenly Wolf Valley, Yangkai felt that he had heard of this sect somewhere before, but when he tried to recall where, he couldn't remember. Later, a flash of thought had suddenly jogged his memory. Ling Yin-chin had mentioned Heavenly Wolf Valley to him. Because Ling Yin-chin's departed husband was from the Eastern Territory's Heavenly Wolf Valley. The two met and fell in love in the solitary void-sealed world. Later, they married, but her husband had died while saving her. Ling Yin-chin cherished his memories to this day. The high-level spirit purifying array she lent to Yangkai at that time was bought by her husband at a high price and was the last memento she possessed of him. Because of this, after the spirit purifying array was damaged, Yangkai took great pains to ask Sangda to repair it, which led to many other affairs afterwards. When Ling Yin-chin came out of the solitary void-sealed world, she had decided to bring her husband's ashes back to Heavenly Wolf Valley where he could rest in peace. Lanhe kept sighing after learning about the matters of Ling Yin-chin and her husband before speaking, then Sister Ling must be a woman of deep and unwavering sentiment. If she wasn't such a woman, why would she go all the way from the Northern Territory to the Eastern Territory just to send her husband's ashes back to his sect? It should be known that this road was not only long, but also dangerous. A moment of carelessness could result in death. "Big Sister Ling is kind and compassionate," Yangkai solemnly said. "What was her husband's name? If he was really a Heavenly Wolf Valley disciple, perhaps I've heard of him," asked Lanhe. Yangkai shook his head. "Big Sister Ling never mentioned it." "Good, when I meet Big Sister Ling, I'll just ask her." Lanhe didn't probe deep into this. Yangkai stated, Big Sister Ling is still deeply tied with her husband, so I think even after she has sent his ashes back, she might not want to leave his side. It is just that Big Sister Ling isn't a Heavenly Wolf Valley disciple, so Heavenly Wolf Valley might not let her stay for a long time. This Yang wants to request from Sister Lan that if you meet Big Sister Ling in the future, please take care of her. If she could join Heavenly Wolf Valley, become a Heavenly Wolf Valley disciple, that would be even better. If that doesn't work, please let Big Sister Ling mourn her husband from time to time, so as to soothe the longing in her heart. Since Brother Yang has entrusted this to me, there will naturally be no problem. Lan He was also very easygoing and agreed at once. Yang Kai was overjoyed as he said, with Sister Lan's promise, I will not have to worry. Lan He was the eldest senior sister of Heavenly Wolf Valley, so her status was definitely incomparable to an ordinary disciple. Since she had agreed, she would definitely follow through. Although her appearance was stunted, she had a heroic spirit. Then what's Big Sister Ling's current cultivation? Third Order Dao Source Realm. Although her strength might not be at the top, it's definitely not bad. Yang Kai gave a pertinent assessment. Third Order Dao Source Realm. Lan He's eyes lit up after hearing this. She clapped and assured, it will really not be a problem for her to join our Heavenly Wolf Valley. If it was someone of unknown origin, we might have to test him or her thoroughly, but since it's someone mentioned by Brother Yang, this test can be waived. I will tell the sect master after I go back. Many thanks. Yang Kai couldn't help but heave a sigh in relief. Although he didn't have much friendship with Ling Yunqin, no matter what, they had come out of the solitary void-sealed world together. With her cultivation, joining Ice Heart Valley would not have been a problem. Moreover, Bing Yun also wanted to keep her, but she was determined to go to Heavenly Wolf Valley, so everyone respected her wishes. If she could join Heavenly Wolf Valley, it could be regarded as a good place for her to stay. This way, she would not only have the support of a powerful sect, but she could also be with her husband day and night. Yang Kai believed that Ling Yunqin would also not refuse this. While the two were talking, Yang Kai suddenly stopped, with Lan He coming to a halt as well. Yang Kai spread his divine sense and scanned the surroundings before speaking, it's here. I will tear space so Sister Lan He can leave without any worries. There will be no danger. Good, Lan He nodded before she cupped her fist and stated, Brother Yang must also be careful. If there is a chance, you have to come to Heavenly Wolf Valley as a guest. Sure, Yang Kai replied. After speaking, his face turned serious as he stretched his hand ahead, piercing into space. As he kept manipulating the local space principles, the void distorted and instantly became unstable. Lan He's face slightly changed as she held her breath, not daring to cause any interference. Open, Yang Kai shouted as his hands suddenly moved to the sides. Under Lan He's shocked gaze, the space in the front was ripped apart like a piece of silk, opening a slit. And with Yang Kai's movements, the gap grew bigger and bigger. Lan He's eyes trembled slightly, looking at the sight before her in surprise. Tearing space with one's bare hands was a skill she had heard of in legends, but never had a chance to witness with her own eyes. But now, this shocking sight was clearly presented before her. From the void crack, Lan He clearly saw the dilapidated scene of the Shattered Star Sea and she immediately understood that she would be able to return there through this opening. Go, Yang Kai shouted in a low voice. Lan He didn't dare to hesitate. Her figure flickered as she rushed into the crack and in a flash, she had arrived on the opposite side. When she turned around to look, the crack was quickly closing. Yang Kai was standing in the void, waving at her with a smile. Brother Yang, take care. Lan He shouted, but the crack had already closed. Who knows whether Yang Kai had heard her or not. After standing on the spot in a daze for a while, Lan He sighed and looked toward the depths of the Shattered Star Sea. Her contact with Yang Kai was short, but it seemed to have opened a new door in front of her, allowing her to see just how powerful a Dao Source Realm cultivator could be. The elite disciples of the top sects she had encountered before were like ants to him. She asked herself whether she could cultivate to such a level, but the answer she got was a firm no. If she wanted to become stronger, the only choice she had left was to break through to the Emperor realm. An urgent notion rose from the depths of her heart, to advance as soon as possible and obtain greater strength. Chapter 2459, It's Good That You're Alive. Published by Divine Dao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Yang Kai was treading through the void like he was walking on the ground, completely ignoring the ubiquitous turbulence. This place might be dangerous to others, but to Yang Kai, it was like a walk in his own backyard. When he first began cultivating the Tao of space, he had entered this place countless times to sense the mysteries of Space Force, experiencing its mystical nature, so he was extremely familiar with the characteristics of this place. Less than an hour after having separated from Lan He, Yang Kai suddenly felt a slightly hot sensation coming from the back of his hand. Naturally, it was the induction between star seals. His expression immediately changed as he rushed in a certain direction. His current star seal was 6-pointed, which could be considered a very high level, so it could sense the position of most other cultivators from far away. After a short while, Yang Kai arrived at a certain location, but when he looked around, the subsequent sight made him frown. Because a bloody picture was before him, countless mutilated limbs and gory pieces of flesh were floating. There was no living being in sight. But in that place, there were 8 ownerless star seals floating quietly. 8 star seals meant that 8 people had lost their lives here. They weren't killed by anyone. Rather because they fell into the void crack and were either swallowed by the void turbulence or were slivered by the chaotic space principles here. When Yang Kai came over, those ownerless star seals seemed to receive some kind of pull as they shot straight toward the back of his hand, transforming into specks of starlight before entering inside the star seal on the back of his hand. Immediately, his 6-pointed star seal grew brighter and hotter. Yang Kai couldn't help but be a little worried. Everyone was pulled in when space collapsed, their futures quite uncertain. He didn't care about the life and death of others, the only one he was worried about was Yin Lisheng. He shouldn't die before Yang Kai found him, for if he did, Yang Kai wouldn't be able to extract any information from him. He was still getting a little response from the front. Yang Kai didn't stay longer and continued ahead. The farther he went, the more dead bodies Yang Kai encountered, leaving only star seals in their place. Without doing anything at all, Yang Kai had already collected more than 20 star seals along the way. In other words, out of 40 or so Tao Source Realm cultivators who were pulled in, about half of them had already died. And judging by what Yang Kai had observed along the way, the survivors should have all rallied together, probably wanting to go in this direction to find a way out, but unfortunately for them, they didn't understand space principles and couldn't break the barrier of space to find an exit. In light of this, they would die sooner or later. Suddenly, Yang Kai heard a faint shout. His eyes lit up as he quickly flew towards the source of the sound. After a while, he came to the front of a surging void turbulence. Apparently, the person, who had shouted before, seemed to have sensed Yang Kai's arrival and hurriedly shouted, "Friend, save me, don't leave me, please save me." Yang Kai remained indifferent. When he had scanned with his divine sense, he had already recognized who this guy was. Yang Kai also knew that the opposite party was already trapped in the void turbulence and would be devoured after a short while. "Where is Yin Lisheng?" Yang Kai suddenly asked. The opposite party was slightly startled after hearing Yang Kai's voice. He then asked in a low voice, "Yang Kai." Obviously, he had also heard Yang Kai's voice. "Where is Yin Lisheng?" Yang Kai asked again. That man bitterly smiled and stated, "Brother Yang, please save me first, the rest we can talk about later." Yang Kai coldly snorted and stated, "Zhang Hao didn't rescue you, why should I then?" Surprisingly, this guy was none other than Brahma Holy Land's Zhang Xian. He and Zhang Hao were the holy sons of Brahma Holy Land. Their cultivations were both impressive, but no matter how powerful they were still just Tao Source Realm cultivators. Only death was waiting for Zhang Xian after falling in the void turbulence, and the more he struggled, the faster he would die. However, there was no sign of Zhang Hao here, so it seemed that Zhang Hao had abandoned him. Zhang Hao. The mere mention of Zhang Hao's name seemed to have touched Zhang Xian's nerves and he gritted his teeth all of a sudden, snarling, "Don't mention that scumbag's name before me. I will kill him sooner or later." Who knows what happened between the two holy sons, but Zhang Xian seemed to hold deep hatred towards Zhang Hao. Yang Kai didn't care to get to the bottom of this either and just sneered, "First you have to get out of here." Zhang Xian's anger suddenly hit the rock bottom as he begged, crying, "Brother Yang, someone as great and generous as you doesn't need to care about this lowly me. If you rescue me from here, I, Zhang Xian, will always remember this gratitude and surely repay you in the future. Tell me first, where did Yin Lisheng go?" Yang Kai indifferently looked at him. Zhang Xian asked, "If I tell you, will you save me?" Yang Kai countered, "What do you think?" Zhang Xian became enraged and shouted, "Then why should I tell you?" Just as he said this, he suddenly realized that he didn't have the room to get angry at this moment and hurriedly corrected himself, "Brother Yang, don't be angry. I, Zhang Xian, just put a foot in my mouth." Yang Kai stated with a snort, I don't want to save you, so I won't save you. No matter what you say, it's useless. Zhang Xian flustered and the flames of fury in his heart burned hotter, but he didn't dare to show it. His mouth was filled with bitterness as if he had eaten a bitter gourd. Although I won't save you, I can avenge you. Yang Kai sneered, Zhang Hao and Yin Lisheng are together, am I right? If you tell me where they went, I will help you kill Zhang Hao. Kill Zhang Hao? Zhang Xian was momentarily stunned, pondering for a long while before finally breaking into madness-filled laughter. Yang Kai didn't urge him and just coldly glanced at him from the side. After a moment, Zhang Xian stopped laughing as he replied with a ferocious look on his face, if you find Zhang Hao, rip his corpse into 10,000 pieces for me. I can do that, I promise you. Yang Kai nodded, thinking that there must be some unknown vendetta between the two holy sons, otherwise Zhang Xian would not hate Zhang Hao this deeply. They went in that direction, Zhang Xian pointed. Yang Kai turned to look, then nodded. He then slightly moved his hand as a moonblade shot straight toward Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian was shocked. Although he felt the energy fluctuations approaching him, he was trapped in a void turbulence. Even if he wanted to escape, he couldn't. All he could do was ask in a shock, what are you doing? With a soft squish, Zhang Xian felt a slight pain coming from his arm. Yang Kai coldly stated, I am taking your star seal. It's the interest for previously attacking me. As for what happens next, I will leave it to luck. While speaking, he reached out and collected the star seal on Zhang Xian's severed arm before flying towards the direction Zhang Xian had previously pointed at. Bastard, bastard. Zhang Xian covered the wound with his other hand as he angrily roared, a hideous look covering his face. But Yang Kai had long disappeared. After continuing forward for about half a day, Yang Kai finally sensed the location of other people, but most of them were already dead, pulled into the void turbulence. The corpses were mutilated and in pieces. Only their star seals remained that flew towards Yang Kai, one after another. Another day later, Yang Kai had already collected the star seals of almost all of over 40 cultivators. After the 6-pointed star seal on the back of his hand had absorbed 30 or so star seals, it finally changed and became a 7-pointed star seal, allowing him to sense others from a greater distance. Rumor had it that if a star seal could be upgraded to the most advanced 9-pointed star seal, one could find the inheritance of heaven devouring great emperor. Who knows whether this was true or false, but Yang Kai wasn't interested in that inheritance at all. Therefore, he didn't try to pursue it. At some point, Yang Kai suddenly noticed the fluctuations of several star seals in front of him. After a little thought, Yang Kai knew that the masters of these star seals were the last ones alive. And that Yin Lisheng must be there, because Yang Kai had found the corpses of the other 2 Netherworld sect disciples, but he hadn't found Yin Lisheng's. This guy's life is pretty hard, he actually made it this far in the void. How did he do it? Yang Kai didn't hesitate any longer, his figure flickering as he shot towards that direction. After the time it would take to burn a stick of incense, Yang Kai arrived at the place where these survivors were. Scanning with his divine sense, Yang Kai found that only 4 people were still alive. Yin Lisheng and Zhang Hao were impressively among them while the other 2 seemed to be the top Dao Source Realm Masters, but Yang Kai didn't recognize them. And it was not just those who were here. Even the mountains and rivers bell that had disappeared into the void was also here. This exotic artifact from the wildlands had given rise to a great emperor, witnessed the war between great emperors, and after tens of thousands of years of silence, was now quietly lying somewhere lost in the void. All its radiance was completely converged and it didn't have the slightest bit of spirituality, as if it was broken. It seemed to be waiting for the arrival of its new master. You're still alive. When Yang Kai arrived, Yin Lisheng fiercely turned around and looked at him in shock. Yang Kai was proficient in the Tao of space, and Yin Lisheng was well aware of this. When the 2 had fought in the Starlight Corridor, Yang Kai had used his mastery of Space Force to shatter the Starlight Corridor. Yin Lisheng was surprised by the fact that Yang Kai withstood the shockwave from the mountains and rivers bell at such a close distance. Furthermore, it appeared that not only had he survived, but he was still brimming with energy. Yang Kai pursed his lips and stated, since you are still alive, why should Brother Yin be so surprised that I am too? Yin Lisheng's eyes lit up instead as he nodded and gratefully said, great, awesome, it's good that you're alive. He looked like he was happy for Yang Kai, but who knows what he was really happy about. Yang Kai suspiciously looked at him and stated, Brother Yin, your tone might very easily cause misunderstandings. Everyone will think that we have a very good relationship. Yin Lisheng burst into laughter, no matter what the relationship between us is, it's still great that you are alive. Yang Kai's face turned cold as he stated, I'm alive, but you will definitely die. Yin Lisheng remained calm and composed as he spoke, there is no true grievance between you and me. How about we forget our past enmity and become friends? Yang Kai's eyes widened as he snapped, am I hearing it right? Brother Yin, you actually want to forget the past enmity and be friends with me? Is there something wrong with your head? Zhang Hao and the other two also had a weird look on their faces. After all, they had personally witnessed the clash and grievance between Yang Kai and Yin Lisheng. Both of them couldn't wait to kill each other, so why had Yin Lisheng's attitude changed so drastically in the blink of an eye? Chapter 2460, Transaction. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Yin Lisheng replied with a smile, there is nothing wrong with my head, rather I am thinking quite clearly right now. Because I know that if I want to leave this place, Brother Yang's help is indispensable. Yang Kai raised his brow and asked, laughing, I understand what Brother Yin means, but, why do you think I will take you out? Yin Lisheng quickly asked, didn't you want to inquire about the puppet of yours? Isn't that puppet very useful to you? Hearing him mention Co, Yang Kai's face immediately sank as he shouted, where is he? Yin Lisheng smiled as he spoke in a calm and composed manner, Brother Yang really values it very much. Since Brother Yang has something he wants, and I have something I want, why don't we make a deal? Yang Kai ground his teeth. Although he couldn't wait to beat the shit out of Yin Lisheng and force him to give up the information on Co's location, brute force couldn't solve the problem at this moment. As long as Yin Lisheng didn't tell him about Co, Yang Kai would be at the end of his wits, and even if Yin Lisheng did tell him something, Yang Kai couldn't say for sure whether he was speaking the truth or lying. Compared to killing Yin Lisheng, Yang Kai would rather learn about Co's situation. After pondering for a while, he agreed with a nod, how should we trade? Let's hear it. Yin Lisheng replied, you take me out of this damned place and I will truthfully tell you about the whereabouts of the puppet. Yang Kai sneered, how do I know you'll tell me the truth? Maybe you don't even know where Co is. I do know. Yin Lisheng's face turned serious, there is no harm in telling you a bit. Your puppet did fall into the Eastern Territory with me back then, but I couldn't subdue it with my strength at that time, so I simply followed after it, looking for an opportunity, but unfortunately, I failed at the last moment. Now, as to where it went in the end, only I know. No one else in this world knows. Brother Yang, you'd best think this through. If we pulled out all our cards and fought here, we both would be defeated and wounded. On the other hand, the deal I'm proposing is very fair. We both get what we need. Yang Kai's face turned colder as he stated, tell me first and I will immediately send you out. I promise that I will not do anything to you. Yin Lisheng denied with a chuckle, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? What do you think we should do then? Yang Kai couldn't help but glower. The two of them endlessly quarreled with each other while the others watched in surprise. They didn't know what Yang Kai and Yin Lisheng were arguing about, but they managed to glean some clues after listening for a while. Zhang Hao suddenly asked, Brother Yin, can he take us out of here? Yin Lisheng replied, glancing at him, if he can't, then no one can. Why? Zhang Hao asked in surprise, this is the void, if we can't break through the barriers of space, there's no way to leave. So many of us tried breaking it together, but it didn't work, so why can he do it alone? Yin Lisheng furrowed his brow as he explained, because Brother Yang is proficient in the Tao of Space. Proficient in the Tao of Space. Zhang Kai was shocked and delighted when he heard this, turning to stare at Yang Kai with a blazing gaze, as if he had found hope of survival. The other two were also extremely excited and they secretly licked their lips. This young master is indeed proficient in the Tao of Space, but what does that have to do with you lot? Yang Kai glared at the three, feeling disgruntled. Zhang Hao said, wearing a smiling face, Brother Yang, we can be considered friends after a fight. Now only a few of us are alive, so if you can really leave this place, why not take us out with you? Rest assured, we will definitely repay you generously in the future for this favor. Yes, we will etch Brother Yang's kindness into our hearts and will definitely return the gesture to you in the future. Brother Yang, it's always better to have many friends. If you come to my Western Territory, this son will definitely welcome you with open arms. The two started yelling along with Zhang Hao, pleadingly looking at Yang Kai. Fuck off, Yang Kai impatiently lashed out. Zhang Hao's face turned colder after hearing this and he glared at Yang Kai, don't be too stubborn. We might not be at our peaks right now, but if we team up, you won't be able to defeat us. Don't force us to take a hard stance against you. Yang Kai coldly snorted. This young master wasn't afraid when there were 40 of you, so what can just the 4 of you do to me now? If you want to die, you are welcome to give it a try. Zhang Hao's face turned stiff all of a sudden because he knew that Yang Kai was stating the truth. Before, 40 of them were unable to do anything to Yang Kai, so now that there were just 4 of them, the chances of them being able to defeat him weren't high. Not to mention, a cultivator proficient in the Tao of space was harder to deal with than ordinary opponents. If Yang Kai ever found he was at a disadvantage in a frontal conflict, he could simply run away and no one would be able to stop him. Yang Kai ignored Zhang Hao and the other 2 and turned to Yin Lisheng and stated in a cold voice, "Since you want to make a deal with me, then come up with something that will convince us both, otherwise, you will die today. At worst, I will go to the Eastern Territory and slowly look for Coco. Yin Lisheng's face sank as he asked, "Brother Yang, how can you be sure that you can kill me?" Yang Kai pursed his lips and stated, "In this place, I can make you die without a burial with a wave of my hand. Tell me, do you still think I can't kill you?" Saying so, Yang Kai really just waved his hand and immediately, the surrounding void turbulence seemed to have received some kind of order and began sweeping towards Yin Lisheng like a long river. Yin Lisheng jumped back in fright and quickly avoided it. After regaining his footing, his face turned extremely pale. He originally believed that, with his remaining trump cards, he didn't need to be afraid of Yang Kai, but now it seemed that this special environment not only didn't restrain Yang Kai, but it even invisibly increased his strength. If they really fought, Yin Lisheng estimated he didn't have even a 20% chance of winning. I must quickly leave here, lest some mishap occurs. Realizing this, Yin Lisheng quickly said, "Brother Yang, look at this." Saying so, he casually tossed something to Yang Kai. Yang Kai wasn't afraid that he would play petty tricks at this moment, so he reached out and caught this object, scanning it with his divine sense before speaking in surprise, "Oh. A soul contract?" Yin Lisheng raised his brow. Since Brother Yang recognizes it, nothing more need be said. A soul contract was a product made by the Palace Master of the Eastern Territory's Serene Soul Palace, Serene Soul Great Emperor, when he was bored and had ample time on his hands. It was almost equivalent to a contract that mortals would use, but the ones who signed it, did so with their souls. Because of a peculiar power that was used to refine soul contracts, neither of the parties that signed one could violate the content of the contract. Soul contracts were extremely rare, and Yang Kai had only seen one in the past, but that was enough to recognize this for what it was and what it meant. As long as the 2 parties signing the contract swore with their souls, they could not lie or violate the terms unless they wanted to court death. Because soul contracts were made by the Serene Soul Great Emperor, and the Serene Soul Great Emperor's Serene Soul Palace was in the Eastern Territory, Eastern Territory's Netherworld sect's disciples had greater access to soul contracts. Is this enough to show my sincerity? Yin Lisheng looked at Yang Kai with a grim look on his face. Yang Kai agreed with a nod. "Of course, there is no problem with this soul contract here." Yin Lisheng stated, "Good, then you will send me out of here, and I will tell you the location of that puppet." Yang Kai pondered for a moment and agreed, nodding, "No problem." Zhang Hao anxiously cried, "Brother Yin, take me too, my Brahma Holy Land and your Netherworld sect are allies. You can't sit back and watch me die." Yin Lisheng frowned before glancing at Yang Kai. Yang Kai stated with a snort, "Zhang Hao's fate has already been decided by another. He must die here." Zhang Hao's eyes bulged as he angrily asked, Who wants my life?" Yang Kai coldly looked at him and replied with a snort, "The one you abandoned and left behind naturally wants you dead." Zhang Hao was dumbfounded as he absent-mindedly muttered, "Zhang Xian." He then angrily shouted, "Impudence. I am the senior brother, and he actually wants to kill me. That ingrate." Yang Kai shook his head and ignored him altogether, turning back to Yin Lisheng and saying, "Brother Yin, swear." "Good." Yin Lisheng nodded and immediately swore with his soul that if Yang Kai was willing to safely send him out, he would definitely inform Yang Kai of Coco's location. Immediately afterwards, Yang Kai also swore on his soul. When they poured in their spiritual energy, the soul contract suddenly started glowing as it split into 2, before it shot straight into Yang Kai and Yin Lisheng's bodies, making the 2 softly grunt. Mysteriously, they felt bound by an invisible shackle. Both of them knew that this was the effect of the soul contract. "Where is Coco?" Yang Kai squinted his eyes at Yin Lisheng. Yin Lisheng smiled before his lips moved, transmitting his voice directly to Yang Kai. Yang Kai's face changed as he confirmed in amazement, "There. Yin Lisheng asked in surprise, "Oh, so Brother Yang actually knows that place?" Yang Kai's face turned ashen as he responded, "I heard someone mention it not long ago." "Are you sure it went there?" Yin Lisheng replied, "I saw it with my own eyes, how can I not be certain?" Naturally, at the beginning, I didn't know what that was, but after having lived in the Eastern Territory for a while, I learned about the dangers of that place. Fortunately, I didn't go in at that time, otherwise I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to meet Brother Yang today. Yang Kai's face turned ugly. Now, he was even more worried about Xiao compared to when he knew nothing about his whereabouts. Yin Lisheng had already signed a soul contract with him, and was bound by its power, so he couldn't have lied. But if Xiao was really in that place, then it might really be disastrous for him. Yin Lisheng, on the other hand, was all smiles as he spoke. "Okay then, this Yin has truthfully told Brother Yang everything he wanted to know, now it's about time you fulfill your end of the agreement." Yang Kai angrily glanced at him before he stretched his hands out, inserting it into the void. Yin Lisheng intently watched, and after seeing a void crack truly get torn open by Yang Kai, a look of surprise and happiness appeared on his face as he praised, "Brother Yang is really impressive. If you manage to break through to the Emperor realm, your achievements will be second only to senior Li Wuyi." "Get out!" Yang Kai lashed out with a cold snort. Yin Lisheng burst into laughter, "Then this Yin will take his leave. Until we meet again. The day we meet again will be the day you die," Yang Kai stated, grinding his teeth angrily. Yin Lisheng didn't care about this threat. His figure flickered as he rushed into the void crack, instantly appearing on the opposite side. When Zhang Hao and the others saw this, they also eagerly followed, using all means at their disposal to reach the void crack and escape from this place. Yang Kai just coldly looked at him, but didn't bother to stop them.